Hey, true believers. Chris Mack finally coming back to you with Onslaught Marvel Universe. But before we get into the comic book, I just kind of wanted to give an update. I know I haven't put out a comic review in probably about 2 weeks or so. Lots happened. Tragically, I lost my mom at the beginning of this month, so life has kind of been turned upside down for me. Many of you probably knew her as the gray-haired lady that was always at the booth with me selling grab bags. So, yeah, I miss her terribly, but thankfully we, kind of went through the grieving phase and, kind of got some closure. So I'm thankful for that, and I miss her terribly, but I know she's with me always. So with that said, now we've kind of had that time with the family, kind of getting back onto a regular track with our comic reviews. And this one was actually really, going back and finally reading it after so many years, I just remember how tragic but entertaining this comic book was. So the print date on this was October 1996, and just like the Onslaught X-Men book, I love that Adam Kubert did a wraparound cover just like that one, which I think was really cool. And see how, remember when I was talking about when you flipped around on the X-Men one, it said Marvel Universe here. But I like how on the flip side here it says X-Men to kind of show where these two tie in. So really, really awesome cover in that sense. And then we open up on Uatu, who is the Watcher of Earth. And, he's been kind of showing up through the Onslaught thing. We kind of see him talking to Apocalypse and whatnot. But before we get any more into the story, let's talk about the book. So this is called With Great Power. It's Scott Lobdell and Mark Waid plot, Mark Waid writing, Adam Kubert with Joe Bennett art, Dan Green with assists from Art Thibert, Tim Townsend, and Jesse Delperdang, I believe. If I got that wrong, I apologize, doing the inks. Richard Starkings and Comicraft doing the lettering, Steve Buccellato colors, Team Bucce doing the enhancements, and Bob Harris at this point was the editor-in-chief. And I just really love how the art team really makes Uatu looking at this just really tragic, because when you flip the page, you see why. And this kind of sets up the stakes immediately. And he's, how Uatu's always talking about how he's supposed to record the tragedies, the happiness, everything that happens on Earth. And he says here, my job is done. And then what I like here is he says, once I was witnessed to a unique wonderment, a span of time when champions of legend routinely risked their lives to battle the forces of evil and tyranny. An era in which the measure of a hero was gauged not by his power, but by his nobility. Love that. By the strength in his heart. It was an age unlike any other. And this is the end of its story. So right there, this sets up the stakes for what we are about to read. So that's really good use of storytelling right there, because you're just kind of like, wait, what's happening here? And we've seen Uatu throughout this Onslaught event. We've seen nods in the X books to the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, especially when Uatu was talking to Apocalypse and Ozymandias. So check out those books. I think that was X-Men, or was it Wolverine? It started out Wolverine 103? I think it was 102 or 103. Or no, was it 101? Well, you guys know. Let me know it in the comments. But anyway. And then we open on what's going on, which is Onslaught, and he's talking to Xavier, talking about how Xavier has no power over him and whatnot. And what I like is Xavier, even though he doesn't have his psychic abilities because they've been shut down by Onslaught, it's basically saying, you're not my equal. And Onslaught's like, I don't believe it. He goes, there's something I do not see reflected in you. One shred of humanity. And that will be your downfall. Which is true. I really like that Xavier calls him on that, because a lot of the times, they say pride cometh before the fall. Well, right there. No human decency. Well, there we go. And then we are treated to, yet again, another 90s panel. And I like how even though the X-Men here, they battered and bruised, they're still going to come at Onslaught, because they've really been put through the ringer the last few issues, starting with that X-Men Onslaught, or the Onslaught X-Men book. And what I like is, okay, they try their best, but they're too battered from too many battles back to back to back. And right here it says, battered and broken from Onslaught's previous attacks, their spirits were strong, but their flesh weak. But you think all is lost. But check this out. I love the use of the paneling, the dialogue, and the A's in the art here. And yet through the haze of the dust, Xavier sensed a coming of hope, of courage, which leads us to another great splash page introducing the Marvel Universe, heroes, villains, and mutants alike, and everyone just starts to work together. And I like how right here it says, of courage, of marvels, and you see everybody helping one another, which is what teamwork is supposed to be about. And Reed says, we're Earth's last line of defense. Win or lose, we go out together. And so it starts just into a cacophony of battle and just great action here. So we'll kind of leave that for you all who want to read the book in its entirety. And again, one thing that I liked about this book is the work between Joseph, who is Magneto, and Xavier. And Xavier's still talking about how he profusely apologizes for mind-wiping Magneto. And right here he goes, I feel safe in assuming that I could not have a finer ally this day. Nor I. We will need the strength of friendship against the worst of both our worlds. Because right there you see the two friends and what their machinations have created. So that's what I kind of like, how it just keeps going back to that. And then we finally see how Onslaught has X-Man, Nate Gray, and Franklin Richards captured because their powers, they can do anything. And the dialogue between these two right here is great. And it really gives Nate hope. You want to see what I'm talking about? Get the book. And again, just more great action here and how everyone can work together. Now, Cable finds a way he can pull Nate and Franklin out, but he has to work with Joseph in order to do it because Xavier does not have his psychic abilities. And Xavier's saying, I forbid it, but Joseph says, I have no choice in the matter, even though my past sins are apparently infinite in number. I'll pay back my debts one life at a time if that's what it takes. Do what you must. So I love that. And then, everyone can't believe that Doom's working alongside them, and he comes up with a plan. And they're like, why are you helping us? And we trust you because, and he goes, because I have no interest in betraying you simply to rule a planet of cinder and ash, child. So here they kind of have a mutual goal of keeping the world alive, but the mutants and the Avengers and whatnot want to do it because they want the human life to flourish, as where Doom wants to rule a populated planet. So you can kind of see selfish to selfless, and we'll get into that here in a minute. And then I like how here you see that Onslaught's bringing this giant fireball planet. And we see Karen and Foggy from the Daredevil world. We see Jarvis. We see Robbie and J. Jonah Jameson. And they talk about kind of how, New Yorkers are sort of jaded living in a world of Marvels. And yet they might think that this is their last. And Robbie even says, all the Bugle reporters are on the street, Jonah. We can get this in tomorrow's edition. Now check this out. This is Robbie saying that, who usually is the one that has Parker's back, right? The more level-headed. And then Jonah says, provided there is one, Robbie. Provided there is one. Instead of him barking, saying, we need people out there. Where's Parker, etc., so forth. He's the one that's just kind of like, I don't know at this point. So, again, there's a really cool scene with Vision and Rogue. I don't want to give that away because it's really interesting. But I am going to spoil this, so heads up. The Hulk's talking about how he's the strongest. And he tells Jean that she needs to shut down the Banner part of him. It's the only way that he can go berserk with rage. And so Jean does. She goes, Banner, are you there? Banner is puny. Hulk is the strongest there is. And I just love that. You got the maniacal, drooling in the red eyes. And just blow for blow with Onslaught and the Hulk. Just boom, boom. And I love those onomatopoeias they add in there. Just great work in showing how, the sonic booms of their blows. And then, again, what I love is how they pay homage to, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, etc., so forth. Because they find a way that they need to beat Onslaught, because at this point Onslaught, everyone thinks he's down, but he becomes pure energy, and so everyone's starting to think this is the end. And then Reed here, he says something very poignant. This goes back to what I was talking about, paying homage. And he goes, "Don't worry, honey, I'm not giving up, but look around at the masks and the mutants who walked in the trail we blazed." Because the Fantastic Four came out in 1961. It wasn't until later that everyone else kind of started coming on the scene. Why did that trail take us all here, to this moment? And Sue's like, I don't understand. You're saying this battle is what all these years have been leading up to? For the first time in my life, I have absolutely no idea. And Susan, that scares me. So you need to be a little worried when the world's smartest strategic man is scared. And then again, we kind of go back. I kind of jumped the gun a little bit, but again, going back to the booms, there's this fellow here. It's a postman. Yeah, postman. And he goes, "Step aside, youngsters. Neither sleet nor hail nor..." Oh my. And if this was a movie, I could definitely see, if Stanley was still alive, I could see that being his cameo, which I think would be hilarious. So this is where I was talking about where the Hulk is down and Onslaught becomes pure energy, and everyone's like, what do we do? Well, Thor says, well, I will absorb Onslaught, and you guys will just have to, as he says, fail me, using his Nordic language. Well, some things happen, and everyone else kind of starts to get the idea and starts to do what Thor does. And what it is everyone... Okay, so spoilers here at the end. If you guys don't want to know what happens here, pause the video, see if you can find a copy of this at your local comic shop, and then come back. We'll wait. And you're back. So in order to beat Onslaught, all the human and, gods, essentially, realize that they have to be absorbed by Onslaught to defeat him. And so Thor goes. 90% of the Avengers go. But mutants can't. Because Reed here says that Onslaught was born a mutant, and if any mutants enter him, then he's just going to live again. So Petro here is with his wife Crystal. Crystal says, Reed said mutants, not inhumans. And at this point, Petro and Crystal are married, so there's a real heartbreaking moment there. And then what I really like is Iron Man goes looking for Doom, because Doom just kind of disappears. And he just grabs him. He goes, release me. What is the meaning of this? I don't expect you to know, Doom. It's a new idea to you. It's called sacrifice. So I love how Tony just, he knows what he has to do, and he takes Doom along for the ride. Some interesting things happen with Bruce Banner there. And so at this point, as we guys see, there's no Spider-Man on the scene here, which I don't understand why Spidey wasn't in the Onslaught parts here. Because after this, you find out that all Earth's heroes are obliterated in stopping Onslaught. So in the aftermath, the only real heroes right now are the mutants and Spidey. And that's how it was for a few years after this. And this leads into some really rough events leading up. Like the next one after this with the X-Men is Operation Zero Tolerance. And this is where we're first introduced to Bastion, who kind of has popped up throughout the years. And I really loved him in Craig Kyle and Christopher Yoss X-Force. But when you read this, it's tragic because you see what the heroes are about, how they're selfless, and that they don't do this for glory or fame. They do it for their fellow man. But when you start looking at behind the scenes, the reason that they killed all like the Fantastic Four and the Avengers off, from what I understand, is because the cells were dropping. And if you look, I'll show one more panel here. At the very end, I wish they wouldn't have done this when they released this book. They really should have left it. But after everything's said and done, and you're just like, oh my God, there's no more Cap, there's no more Fantastic Four, there's no more Thor, there's no more Iron Man. But then it's like, oh, don't worry, the saga continues in Fantastic Four 1, Captain America 1, Iron Man 1, Avengers number 1. That did not need to be added. They should, if they were going to do that, they should have left this, just like with the death of Superman. They didn't tease that he was coming back yet. They took their time. You know, they did the death, the funeral, and then, you know, you start thinking, you got comfortable thinking that there's going to be 4 Superman, and then they finally brought Clark back. They should have done the same thing here. Because at this point, what they did is they kind of let some of the Image writers that left during the Exodus, like Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, come back to Marvel and write the the new Heroes Reborn number 1s. And yeah, it was kind of like supposed to be in a pocket universe created by Franklin Richards. Because there's something referenced here. You want to know what I'm talking about? Pick up the book. But yeah, it was the whole thing I think Marvel did for sales. But ignoring that part, I really like, again, as I've referenced several times, that Scott Liddell had an idea and just said it would be cool to create a villain that could beat the Juggernaut. And they're like, what's his name? Onslaught. And that's all he had. And it accumulated into this, which is a really, you know, heart-wrenching good story. And then be able to collaborate with all the X writers through X-Force, X-Factor, X-Men, Uncanny, and gave us a relatively good event. Now, at the time, I remember when I'd ask people about Onslaught, they was kind of like, it was all right. But, you know, now that it's had some age, it's actually a really good story. So, yeah, we are not done yet. We have the aftermath to go through. But in terms of Onslaught being destroyed, this is the book. And if you've enjoyed this comic, please make sure to first support your local comic shop and see if they have it in stock and pick it up and read it. And if you've enjoyed this review, we definitely appreciate it if you take a minute to hit like, share, and subscribe. Helps the club channel more than you possibly know. And if you won't mind hitting that fancy little hero bell next to subscribe, that way as we continue to upload content, you guys will get notified. You can come to the channel. And we'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback down in the comments below or our social media pages, which I'll make sure to leave the links in the description below. So with all that said, thank you all so much for stopping by, and I hope you all continue to have an absolutely amazing day reading, and happy hunting, true believers.